Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Julie Shariel. I'm a senior analyst covering the fintech sector for Bloomberg Intelligence. I'm thrilled to be with you here today with our distinguished group of guest speakers. Welcome to the future of financing, leveraging digital transformation for a virtual world. So today we're going to examine how financial services leaders are enhancing or embracing really digital transformation, updating their legacy systems and moving back-end systems to the cloud at a rapid pace to compete with startups and just navigate the challenges in this increasingly virtual world. Today we want to hear from you, the leaders on the front lines of the financial services industry, to discuss how you're prioritizing to stay competitive beyond the COVID-19 crisis. We want to hear what the future looks like. Simple question, right? Before we begin the program, just a few housekeeping notes. The event is virtual, so please bear with us if we experience any technical issues.
A real thanks for joining today's roundtable discussion. I know everybody has, very hectic schedules, and to take the time to share your thinking with us all is really appreciated. And Julie and I thought I'd just kick us off with a few thoughts, and then I think everybody will have a lot to add. So, of course, I tried to just step back and think about 2020, and I think we'll all conclude that probably the toughest challenge that we've faced has been balancing just an overflowing plate of priorities, and it's happened every single day. But I'm optimistic, and I also think that we'll conclude we've accomplished a great deal despite unprecedented, obviously professional, personal, political, and economic concerns. Even before 2020, as we all know, the profit margins and business models for many financial services firms have been highly stressed. And the pandemic, of course, has only intensified this. And what we've seen is it's really prompted the need to radically transform operations and address rapid shifts in customer needs. And I think for almost everybody, this has occurred amidst a reduced cost envelope, persistent regulatory regimes, and very importantly, rising cybersecurity attacks. In fact, I recently read that cyber attacks on banks increased by 238% just in the first few months of the pandemic. But as we talk today, financial services earnings reports for the third quarter do appear solid. Clearly, global volatility certainly gave trading operations a big boost. But at the same time, the widespread deferral of non-performing loans will start to fade in 2021. And the US is just one of many economies that hasn't continued the consumer stimulus programs which buoyed spending in the middle of the year. Indeed, a November report from Oxford Economics has noted the third consecutive weekly decline in the US. And it commented on, and I quote, the dangerous cocktail of surging COVID infections and fading fiscal support that led to a visible slowdown in economic activity. So given these realities that I know we're all aware of, I thought today's theme actually is about finding success in adversity. And an observation is that firms that are continuing to do well mostly entered the beginning of this year with a modern enterprise architecture, a solid data and AI strategy, an aggressive cloud program, and very importantly, a commitment to digital training and collaboration techniques. So if you say it in another word, they had an operating model underpinned by technology that positioned them well for the agility required. Some of the lessons I think we've learned are, first, we must embed risk management, compliance, and security from the ground up, not as an afterthought. Second, that transforming one's data and AI environment is very important to improve efficiency and enable analytics and AI tools. And third, cloud migration. It's not just about cutting costs. In fact, a recent survey of over 370 financial services executives found that the top 3 expected benefits from cloud were improved security, IT security, business agility, and employee productivity. And of course, IBM's been deeply involved in all of these areas. As you likely know, we acquired Red Hat, so our clients can leverage a true hybrid cloud strategy. They can manage centrally computing infrastructure wherever it may be, on our cloud, on-prem, or on other public clouds. And we very firmly believe that our cloud for financial services, which offers several hundred security and regulatory compliance controls engineered into the IBM public cloud platform, is another fundamental plank for the industry, as Bank of America, BNP Paribas, and MUFG's early adoption would suggest. So those are just some starting thoughts. And let me now hand the conversation to Julie to engage us all in this discussion. And I look forward to a really stimulating hour together. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. So let's dive into our first question. I promise I'm not going to ask you about your efforts to transition every one of your employees to work from home. Okay, we've been there, done that, right? What I do want to ask, though, is, as the pandemic unfolded, what was the biggest shift efforts to stand today, now that you all have several months of experience with this under your belts? Anybody want to take that one first? Rahul.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think I work for a 102-year-old company, so you can appreciate this TIA. We are largely in retirement and retail, and we are just like another financial conglomerate. And one of the things that we saw was massive adoption of all the digital technology, as we call it, whether it is mobile first on the banking side, or you're looking at our financial advisors, thousands of financial advisors all of a sudden getting out from the office environment and collaborating with our clients with hundreds of thousands of sections. Our call center folks, you got a couple thousand folks who are in call centers. Luckily, over past couple of years, we had adopted a lot of the cloud technology, digital technology, and made our partial call centers work from home experiment work over the past couple of years. And we rotated a bunch of call center folks. So a couple thousand folks just working from home and actively talking to the clients in probably one of the most volatile time in their lifetime. What I believe we could have done in 5 years, I'm sure most of my colleagues would agree, we probably achieved that in 4 or 5 months. And the speed and it's still accelerating. It's not just the few things that just I outlined. I think we are going to have to meet our clients where they want us to meet. So the good old model of come to my office or I come to your office, that's gone. I think we're going to continue to see paper disappear. So some examples like e-notary, no longer you need physical signatures, trade confirmations on some of the derivative stuff. So tremendous progress on digital transformation, and also the adoption, getting our clients on the journey with us, whether it is engaging them through some of the conversation very early on, through one-on-one conversations or through group chats to ensure that they were comfortable with the journey we were taking them on. So tremendous challenges, whether it is work from home for our call center folks or the development folks or our clients who were not used to having so many sessions on the Zooms or other channels. So a lot of tough things to handle, but I think all of us, we have conquered it pretty well. And the pace is going to continue to accelerate. This is not stopping here. So I guess that's something that I would offer up as just a beginning thought.
Anyone else on the digital, just the big shift in your digital strategy? Ivneet.
Yes, hi. So I would say I was just surprised to see how quickly our workforce and the employees both adopted. And I think where we saw the leverage was before COVID, around 2 years ago, we had already kicked the digital transformation in high gear from a client perspective. and employee perspective. So it was like one day we all went home and then nobody missed a beat because we had the cloud enabled tooling from an email perspective, communications perspective. So all those channels were already available for people to collaborate and talk to each other. And we added whiteboarding and we continued adding the collaboration abilities on top of what we already have. And our employees, our clients both responded really, really well to it. And to the point which Raul was making about going through the transformation when it comes to being cloud first, API led, and making sure that you're embedding security, resilience, availability, all of that in your entire ecosystem, it has just caused us to hyper focus more on that and actually accelerate that journey. We had started it, but now we are, it has given us a different momentum. So as much as it has been harder to get used to the change and not being able to see your friends and colleagues and do those water cooler conversations, there has been good which has come out of it as well. The customer centricity and the true value of using all the new technologies and tools is coming to the forefront of the transformation.
Interesting. It sounds really like yeoman's work that everyone was taking on. Rick, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think the word you used, Julie, which was great, but we need to be clear. You said the word shift, right? And some people feel shift is from one thing completely to another. I think what everybody here just said is they went from shifting from third gear to fourth gear, maybe to fifth gear or to overdrive. And that's what this did, in the sense of these were not things you turn on overnight. It's been a continuing investment over a great deal of time. And that type of trajectory and where the industry is done has allowed us to handle what was could have been a catastrophic event for the world, except we kept going and we supplied services to our customers and volumes went up and we kept things moving forward. And everybody here, as you kind of watch the dynamics, nodding their head, I think we were all heading in that direction. We just went from fourth to fifth or fifth to sixth. The gear, I like the shift analogy, Julie. I just wanted to be a gear ratio shifting as opposed to, this is a big surprise. And all of a sudden we went from paper to completely working from home. We were all making investments in this space, and that's where the technology really enabled the right experience for us to do what had to be done for the world. And so, it's great to hear that other people had that same story because without it, it's an environment that we're all partnering from a digital perspective. It's all about interaction and engaging and going through that. And the more we hear that that's possible, and we keep going into the next gear. I like the shifting, maybe not for these circumstances, but I love the pace that we're going in, and maybe a little bit on better circumstances in the future, but let's not lose the speed. And I think we're very excited about seeing that the return in the investments we've made over the last few years.
Hey, Rick, it's Sarah, just to ask you just to elaborate on that, because one of the dynamics that you see move depending on the times is the dynamic between technology leading the strategy to enable business or business leading the strategy and relying on technology to enable it. So what would be your reflections during this time, to your point, because technology's just become so evident in terms of what it's been able to do to not just enable, the financial service firms to continue, but meet, as you said, everybody said, the increased demands from their customers and clients. Do you have any observations in terms of that dynamic?
I think people had to take risks more because of the circumstances and were willing to do so, but still in a very controlled manner. What was great about it is we didn't give up any of our ideals or any of our ethos of what we think about as what we are at UBS, because we're never going to do that. No. But what we found was we could have those conversations quicker, provide the evidence, maybe do it in a different way. And so where we focused on things like manual controls versus automated controls, we said, actually, instead of having 10 manual controls, let's do 1,000 automated controls. And actually, isn't that better? Isn't that better for our customers? And having that type of mindset change, through those types of circumstances, we're walking out of here saying, we've proven that, our volumes went up fourfold. Right. And we're glad we could, be a part of that, the part of the industry and be able to take that. Where we went from a business perspective is 100%. I think the urgency allowed us to think out of the box a little bit. And that was just great. I mean, we couldn't have had better partners with our business, with our regulators. I mean, you talk about the laws and how things are in there. Everyone understood that we were never going to give up on controls. We were never going to put our customers at risk, but there were other ways to find that. So just having that kind of, let's go think out of the box a little bit. And yet taking advantage of some of the investments we made. We had a program called A3, any device, anywhere, anytime. That program took years, but that allowed us to go from 40% of people working from home to 95% of people working from home overnight. And it worked. It just worked because we'd made that investment over time. Did we sweat a little bit when we hit 95% plus? Yeah, of course, but it worked, and we were really pleased to see that it there. And even some of the experience from the business people was, I didn't realize it would be this easy to do this. And so now they're thinking differently about how to engage across that. So it's that right investment, show it works, but also changing a mindset but never giving up on your ethos. I mean, we never took any shortcuts. We couldn't do that. We still had to make sure things were going along because that's what we do at UBS. But I think, but finding different ways of doing it was something we also wanted a lot of focus on.
Brian, did you want to chime in here maybe to Sarah's points?
Right. So I would say I think Sarah's initial comment around having a strong foundation is actually critical, and I think each of the speakers have hit on that. But going in with a strong foundation, then what we saw was really a creativity and a challenging of kind of status quo, both from kind of senior leaders, but also from individual contributors. And so what we were able to do is really respond to both. And so from individual contributor view, they really wanted to be part of the solution. They wanted to really be empowered to take the next step. And what we've been able to do is really work with them to get them tools and techniques. We already had many of these tools. They just wanted to be able to leverage them better. And so we've been able to really jump on that opportunity and find a lot of incremental efficiencies throughout the operation. And then from a senior leader view, they wanted to challenge some of the status quo and really think about how can we operate different? How can we meet with clients in a different way? And that's really enabled our business architecture group to really jump in directly with those senior leaders and really rethink, are there new ways that we can connect with customers? Are there new ways for us to empower the investment teams? And there's been some really great ideas that have come out of the creativity of the situation. And so while the situation's unfortunate, we've been able to leverage that to really rethink how we've been able to run our business going forward.
Thanks, everyone. What's very clear is how much change happened in such a short period of time. And so, I'm wondering what's next, right? If the next phase of this is going to be eventually coming back to the office at some point, whether it's in the spring or mid-year, whatever it may be, depending on how things unfold with the vaccine and so on. There's the technology question, there's the user adoption question, but what sticks? Right. So how do you kind of foresee us things maybe shift back toward normal gradually over the course of next year? What sticks with what you've done? And what are you thinking about in terms of how to repurpose for the new normal?
Yeah, at Principal, one of the things that we're really thinking hard about is what are the personas of the different teams and how are they going to work going forward? So it's different if you're in a call center versus you're in a project team versus you're a part of a trading team. So what do those personas require in terms of how people want to work? The daily interaction is different. In a project team, you may want to come into the office or onto a campus and really have some deep discussions about things. If you're a trading team, the interactions are going to be a little bit different. A call center person is working more independently, and we have to have a high quality of experience with the customer. And so what we're really diving into is understanding those personas and how they want to work in the future. And then how does that drive what we need in terms of facilities, in terms of collaboration tools and technology, and in terms of how we help our teams work together. And so I think that's the critical part of principle.
Interesting. It needs, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to say that we have been doing surveys and employee pulse check, in last 3 or 4 quarters actually, as it has started, and then we didn't know when it was going to end. So we have continued to get that pulse check, and our realization at this time is that we are executing very strongly in a remote work environment, and we will never go back to the way we used to be before for an overall Silicon Valley Bank strategy. It will end up being a hybrid work model for us. So we are using a few, I would say, ideas to see how our location and workforce strategy pans out globally. So we are looking at a concept of creating hubs. So it doesn't have to be in our core office location. We can create multiple hubs around the globe where people have the flexibility to work from home most of the time, but also have the ability to go to a place once a month or for a few hours every week to be able to meet with their colleagues. So that is definitely an idea which is going to come to fruition very soon for us. And our associates have responded very well to that because it gives them the flexibility to be at different locations. But at the same time, it gives us as a company the ability to have that right set of talent distributed across the hubs where they can meet and whiteboard and do all that kind of good stuff, which really brings the collaboration out while living closer to their families or cheaper location cost or any of that.
So interesting to come up with that hybrid approach, and it seems like it's interesting. Anybody else want to chime in on sort of what's going to stick as we begin to move back toward normal over the next few months?
Yeah, thanks. So Matthew speaking for BNP Paribas. So I think what will stick, in fact, the pandemic was a good crash test, I guess, for the organization. Good news, as everyone was saying, a lot of things still were up and running. I think what will stick is everything will be like fully digitized. Meaning there was still some processes based on paper or manual. I think that will just come around to be fully digitized and some of them automated. And to Evenet's point, I think what is still like work in progress for everyone is how we can shift to this fully virtual mode, to the hybrid mode. We've been lucky. I'm based myself in San Francisco, but we've been lucky in Europe to see like back and forth to the office in many countries, in Italy, France, etc. And we are still figuring out what is the best way to do this hybrid model. We knew how to do it 100% in an office. We know how to do it 100% virtual, but how does it work exactly in the future? And I think first thing, like the concept of what is a physical location, also team are much more distributed. We had like very good feedback and success stories actually on development teams and new innovative launch. It was easier for them, in fact, as a feedback to have like multi-countries approach. Historically, it required like travel and synchronization much more. Right now, because everything is only virtual or with some physical location, it's easier to synchronize in multi-countries. And so it helped, in fact, the organization, I think, mature in the way to distribute, in fact, not just decision, but also the work and task in a way that historically the organization, I think, was too shy to try. So thanks to this, in fact, we're in this mode. So I think from a client perspective, everyone is asking the same, like basically like more digitized process, being able to do everything almost on mobile and different tools. And that's something that the bank can provide. And I think the expectation internally is the organization and also the way projects are done will be much more agile in the way, and technology allow it. If we had this pandemic 10 or 50 years ago, it would have been a very different story. Now the good news, it was a crash test, but everyone, I would say, survived and in a very good position.
Mattia, I think you make a really good point, which is, yes, there has to be a lot of focus on how jobs are going to get done in the future and where they're going to get done, and what is the right meeting venue and sharing venue. But I think the other point you're making, which we're seeing a lot of, is this now renewed focus on really using technology, not just from a client perspective, but from all of the internal process perspectives as well. So much more focus. Yet again, it's like the holy grail on how do we really capture the value of our data so that we're really using that to drive the insights that we want. And with that, improve automation, as well as obviously the final outcome with the client experience. But we're seeing those topics, particularly automation with AI, is top of mind as now becoming a compelling need, not a nice to have. So I don't know if that resonates with you as well.
No, I guess so. Especially for BNP Paribas, we focus for the last 10 years a lot on the consumer experience, digitization in many countries. And what we are starting, in fact, it's not starting, it's been like 1 or 2 years accelerating, is on the employee experience, what you're resonating with you. So it's almost applying the same kind of tool processes we did on the consumer end in terms of say customer design, etc., but also thinking all the tasks that could be facilitated, automated, both from a consumer, like time saving, better experience, etc. And we are starting also, which is interesting, I think, for IT departments also to think more about client provider way, meaning like you're asking clients how they're feeling about things, you're asking them about expectation, also like satisfaction stuff. So it's changing also the internal dynamic. It's more and more a partnership model, but where in fact the employee, I would say, was not forgot, but it was like not the priority strictly. It was consumer first always. And now I think the employee, we are starting to realize also the value to give better tools and better access to employees. So I think it's just not back to normal, but customer will be always first, but the employee also is taking a growing, I would say, interest from the top management and the IT teams too.
Let's pull in Sumit here. Sumit, do you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I think what I want to do is just help just connect a few dots, some of the great points that have been made already to answer that question, what sticks. I think, first of all, I wanted to say that for us in Bank of America, what really this stress event did, which was the pandemic, and a number of you said that, it actually validated our sustained investment in operational excellence and in technology almost over 10 years. So it was not a random event. It was not a chance. It was not a fluke. It was a well thought of plan to make sure that and I think points that were made, our processes are efficient, are streamlined, which is about how we work. So it's not just about technology. And therefore, when all the digitization has happened, the digital transformation has happened, it's a good foundation. And the foundation is that your core, your processes, your activities are set properly so that you're not digitizing a bad process or something that's not efficient. That's kind of number two. So the stress event, we did very well. We literally, were resilient. We serviced our customers. We did not change our book of work. Our initiative portfolio stayed the same. Nothing came out of it. So we're still delivering the same plan. We're still filing the same amount of patents that we filed, actually more this year than last year. So nothing changed in that sense. And if anything, we added on new priorities for our customers, like the PPP program, but the number of banks did as well. So new things got added, but things didn't get taken out. So that starts from that core. But it does also give you the chance to really figure out where things worked brilliantly and where things have opportunities to improve a bit, even though we perform very well. And that inspection is important as we take ourselves forward to the next frontier. In terms of then talking about, does that mean sort of, massive amount of digitization? I think that continues for sure. But it also means, and we've seen it, and that's happened over the years, that we call our strategy high tech, high touch, which means that at any given moment, on any given circumstances, clients need to have the opportunity to either interact with us digitally, which they're adopting a lot more now, but at the same time, when they need face-to-face, when they need the high touch, we're able to do that as well. So recalibration of that, calibration of any of the opportunities that have come through are very important as we inspect and take ourselves forward.
And just to follow up on that, are you seeing? I like the idea of high tech and high touch, and I could see you need to do that to satisfy sort of all clients. Are you seeing a clear shift toward one or the other, or is it really just very dependent on the customer, and both are still equally important in the
I think I echo the points I made. In the last few months, clearly we've seen the volumes on digital go up for sure. But having said that, I think we want to give the clients the option. I mean, nothing changes in terms of our strategy. You know, we were the first to roll out mobile banking here a decade or so ago. So, in the sense that nothing changes in terms of our strategy, we are still going to have the same sustained investment. We spend $10 billion in technology a given year, $3 billion in new initiatives, and that will continue in the future. But having said that, we've seen that greater adoption over the last since the pandemic. But having said that, we will give the clients the option, again, retain the option to allow them to do the high touch interaction when they deem to do so. So I think that's the two-part strategy.
I'd like to turn to a point on artificial intelligence. Sarah brought this up as something that she's been seeing more. And so I'd like to throw it out to the group. How have you been, or how are you harnessing data, across your corporation's platform, in order to take advantage of AI? And how is that sort of, has that grown to become more front and center, given the recent changes? Samit, go ahead, please. If you were raising.
Yeah, I think, look, I think the data has been a core to our strategy in technology. Without good, sound foundational data, without making sure that the data is resilient, the data is clean, you cannot even think about having a great AI platform, because the use of data on that platform is very important. So I would say that it is foundational. Without that, there cannot be good, ethical AI.
This is Brian. I'll add on to his comments there that I agree the data foundation is absolutely essential. And I think one of the things that we've seen out of the pandemic is actually, everybody's had to focus to deliver and to keep up sales and to keep up client experience and to keep operations lean. And those groups that have been able to leverage data have really been able to accelerate through that and do the best. And so what we're seeing is a real increase in the demand and expectation for using data for analytics. And AI certainly accelerates that and adds a degree of sophistication that without AI, you can't achieve. And so we've seen a real increase kind of across the board in our data analytics and AI capabilities and the demand for that. And frankly, the investment in those capabilities.
Yeah, that is something we can also see. We are the Bank of Innovation Economy, and we have over 50% of our companies going IPO in last, even this year. So what we are seeing a lot, because we see their journey when they're starting, and we are seeing a lot of solutions coming, which are making building these data foundations easier, using AI on top of that easier. So we are seeing that trend happening. And I think for financial institutions like us, it's incumbent on us to take advantage of that. So yes, building the data foundation is absolutely important. And as Sumit said, you can't do ethical AI without that. And I think at the same time, we need to start looking beyond it, because the kind of solutions, the kind of insights these new companies, the new innovators are driving, it has the potential to change our lives, not just in the financial services industry, but in healthcare and climate change and all of those areas. So for us, we are really excited when we see the pace of innovation coming through our doors, and we enable that, and then we are able to make use of that on our side to improve the products and experience for our clients.
I just add a couple of things here. I think those of us who did invest in the foundation data technologies, I think we have been able to benefit a lot. And I think Sumit brought up this very good point. And as we go through this pandemic, and one of the most important things about right now we call it high touch as well as high tech, but high touch is more virtual than coming to the office. But it is still very high touch given that we have to own the entire relationship with a client. Now, in past, if you were a financial advisor or a banker, the fragmented data was okay because your financial advisor, banker, or any other individual professionals were able to sew these things together in their offices through different data sources. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So those of us who were invested in the foundation data technology are not only able to put all these things together and present a good high touch as well as high tech front in front of a client and give them a full service and more satisfactory service, but also run an analytics, what you talked about, Julie, artificial intelligence. I mean, we all know garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have a consistent data across all the platforms, running artificial intelligence, data analytics, so on and so forth, all the buzzwords, just doesn't yield any productive insights for the customers. So, or for ourselves. And I guess, luckily in past, all of us can vouch for this one. When it comes to investments of dollars, somehow most of us have seen from our internal business user side says, data, we can kind of peel back a little bit. Let's invest a lot more in the front office or what is client facing or the trading technologies. I think all of a sudden, all of us, including our partners, realize that those of us who made those investments are yielding phenomenal results, are able to yield a lot of benefits to our clients and hence to our shareholders also. So, good investment in data, good investment in a comprehensive data platform. So I think it's paying off. Those of us who are able to sustain those investments long term.
So interesting. So definitely the common theme I'm hearing here is the importance of data, getting the data right, really, in order to maximize your AI platform and what it's capable of doing and what it's capable of doing fairly and accurately. So even though it may not be immediately noticeable, right?
Yeah, I think just to build on that comment, Julie, I mean, and Raul, I think you were getting at this. The challenge has been that without the right data architecture, it doesn't matter what you try to do to preserve and cleanse your data, you can't create it into the value and the insight that you need. So I think when you're using this word data foundation, I think that's what you're driving at. And so I guess the question would be, what are your learnings in terms of the robustness of the data architecture to really be able to drive this necessity of insight and value, which, to your point, used to be viewed as a nice to have and now is considered a necessity. Is that the right way to interpret your comments? And then, so what are the fundamental essentials to get to that point? Because so many firms are still really struggling with it.
You're correct, and I think we will still partially continue to struggle with it because this is a long-term sustained investment. When you look at in most of our banks, you would see client data, simple client data, be replicated multiple times. And when you change data in one place, I'm just giving a very simple example. It doesn't make it all the way through. So if the architecture from day one, if it's not done right or not flexible enough, let's not put it, it's not a right or wrong answer, it's flexible enough because some of us have seen banks also integrate, there is M&A activities, we buy companies, integrate companies. So, fundamental client data, if the architecture of the client data or the data elements in general is not flexible enough, then what you see is it's extremely complicated to saw all these pieces together over time. So having the right architecture from the get-go, and if it is not there, then at least there is enough technology out now to be able to make it a little bit more flexible, allowing multiple sources of data to integrate well. Also, change it once, use it multiple times, as we all call it, essential. So where I was going with this is, quality of data, right architecture, flexibility, and able to change it once and propagate it across all the different data warehouses, data sources. I think is very critical.
Thanks, Rahul. Maybe we could pull in Rick here. Rick, do you want to add to the conversation on AI?
Yeah, well, it was more about the data architecture stuff. I think we've reached a point when you think about data architecture today. We used to, if you go back just a few years, the idea was always bring your data to the compute, right? That was how people designed things, because the data didn't tend to be that large. The compute was the very difficult resource to get to. And so you had this whole data architecture was based on that construct. And now when you talk about the large amount of data that we're talking about, and when you bring cloud in, now you're bringing compute to data, right? When you're talking about the size of data that you have today and some of these data sets that you talk about, if you wanted to move that data to somewhere else, the fastest way to do that, and this is a little bit of a joke, and I'm giving you a heads up that I'm going to try a little humor here, and I'm known for not being very funny, but the idea was the fastest way to move some of these large data sets is by truck, because it's just too much. You can't move 12 petabytes of storage in a reasonable time frame, except by loading the disks onto a truck and driving it somewhere else. And so that architecture is fundamentally making us change the way we think about things. And when you talk about AI capabilities, you're saying, I have this data, this amorphous thing in the cloud, and now you're saying, can I drive my compute to it? Can I drive my AI patterns, my AI capabilities to it? And that fundamentally changes our data architecture, which instead of having lots of duplication of data, you actually want to have sanctity of data. Your data quality and integrity has to continue to increase, because the size of it means your architecture is fundamentally different. So I think it's a really great time to be in right now from an architecture perspective, Sarah. That's when you ask that question is it different today? Absolutely, because we still have speed of light. Until we break that barrier, we're going to get to a point where now we have these great things like cloud that allow us to change the way we approach the problem. And I think that with that, it's the size of data. AI has been around for decades and decades. It's only now where you've got the size of the data and the compute capabilities together that give you real value kind of AI. And so it's a great time, but it does mean the architectural change has to fundamentally change. If it's all about copying data, moving it around, it's a very difficult and expensive task.
What about the ROI, proving the ROI? Because that often comes up as a hurdle for organizations. Inherently, they know that this is necessary and the right thing to do, but the ROI piece is puzzling. What's your thinking around that?
I think ROI, in the way you opened up a little bit, Sarah, when you talk about why people do cloud, I don't actually focus on, my ROI is not based on expense reduction. I tend to very rarely focus on expense reduction. We start with productivity, speed, delivery, accuracy, being able to get insights we never had before, being able to answer questions. Can we rebalance a customer's portfolio 100 different times? Can we do what-if analysis that we have never been able to do before and give our customer an experience that says, we have now much more insight into what we do for you that we could have ever given before. Oh, and then by the way, cloud is cheaper. I just don't start with that as the conversation. I don't start with, because if I'm only focusing on expense reduction, then I will drive down expense, but I don't drive up experience. I think it's and one more thing kind of, we do it. When you do it right, we ran a hackathon recently, and the infrastructure to run the hackathon, which was completely on the cloud, was 90% cheaper than the previous year's hackathon infrastructure because it was all cloud. But we didn't focus on that. We focused on the developer experience, which was off the charts. And so the ROI, it'll be there. I trust it. And if you're really there, and I think everybody sees it, let's go. Everybody's talked so far about the experience, the customer experience. That's your primary focus. You deliver that in an intelligent way, taking advantage of these types of technologies, your ROI will be there. I just trust that. And history has shown that to be the case, at least for what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that, Rick. I don't think ROI is not even really part of the conversation. People are seeing the result and the conviction and as a result have the conviction to make the investments necessary. Beyond the architecture shift that Rick hit on, I think the other major shift that's occurred is really around data governance and decentralizing that data ownership and stewardship. Historically, that used to be kind of a central function. And then you had to, you were talking about how do we build out teams and departments and so forth to really manage all that data. And that required an ROI because you're making this big investment in human capital. As we've been able to decentralize that data stewardship and governance, that's become a critical component to being able to move quickly because you can now trust the data in a new way that you were never able to before. The data, when it's needs to be scrubbed and high quality, it's being done so at the source instead of at this central group. And so I think that's also a big shift that's really changed the dynamic, both at Principal as well as other organizations around the industry.
I echo that, both your comments. I think data, for it to be right, has to be everybody's responsibility, right? Front to all the way in the end-to-end process chain. A couple of other points I want to make is in terms of ROI. I mean, it goes back to my earlier point, without having good data that's accurate, data that's representative, you can't have ethical AI. I mean, ethical AI means delivering the right outcomes for customers. And if the data is wrong, the data is not representative, the data has biases, historical biases, you're going to get a very bad outcome. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon all of us to not let that happen. So, and there's no ROI for that, for doing the right thing. I still think that as much as the architectural dimension covers pretty much a lot of what you guys have talked about, which is the movement of data as well, I do think that staying on top of that foundation element of data, which is having an authorized data source for a type of data, we have a number of them, a single source of that data, tracking the usage, the adoption, tracking the data lineage, having, to your point, governance, ownership, and accountability all the way end to end, having great testing, validation, QA, all that stuff sounds simple, but it's still very important to keep on top of all of that. And looking at data both in terms of structured, unstructured, behavioral. So I think that dimension of data, given the fact we capture so much more of it as we go along, every day we create more data than we have for the past several months, if not years. It's very important that still is core to running a great business, but also to having great AI.
Yeah, and I would just add
Thanks,
that
everyone.
baking in security, compliance, access requirement, data governance from the very beginning in the architecture, that saves a huge amount of money. Retrofitting what you have to add all those elements is very, very expensive. And that is something we have seen from experience. So from our data lakes perspective, what we have done is that all the controls are automated and baked in, and it requires 20 departments to talk together, frankly. So data architecture is not just a CDO or CIO office responsibility. It requires the entire organization to come together to bring these 20 different elements to get the data architecture right. And that's when we are seeing that it truly delivers the value and the ROI and lets us drive the insights faster to drive the customer experience, but in a very secure and compliant manner, which is essential for us, given the type of data we as financial institutions host.
Julie, did we lose you?
Okay, am I back? For a minute, I was on pause. Okay, you can hear me now? Sorry about that. Is not very unstable here. I apologize. I thought we could switch to a great conversation, everyone. Thank you. I thought we could switch to the topic of the cloud and moving to the cloud. And Rick talked about it and talked about how in some ways it was actually very important for productivity and speed. But I'd like to ask just generally to the group, what are the latest attitudes within your organization about moving to the cloud? And has that changed in the last few months?
I can jump in and provide some comments. I would say the attitude towards the cloud at Principal has not changed. We're committed to a cloud strategy. We've aligned across the enterprise on a single provider, at least as a preferred initial provider. And I think there's kind of unilateral agreement that it's an opportunity, as was mentioned earlier, not focused on cost savings initially, but really around business agility, getting better insights into data, and creating and getting capabilities to our business and customers more quickly. And so those efforts are very sustainable, and the path is pretty clear on the way forward.
I would echo the same thing what Brian said. I think we don't go with the cloud as we are saving money. I think it is a couple of things. Number one, it allows us to deliver things faster and quicker for the clients, and also allows the IT folks to focus on things that are more value added for our clients, rather than always trying to focus on things that, frankly, we can buy. It is not, I use the term Uberization of technology. If there is something which is established and you can buy it and commoditized, it may be a good thing to, kind of let the utility company handle our utilities. And cloud has almost become like a utility company, minus few things here and there. But if you have a good hybrid cloud strategy, it's easier to now migrate. We are moving, but slowly but steadily. I think eventually the goal is to move as much of a technology to cloud, as many platforms, and then really focus more on continue to add value for our clients. And we are a financial services technology company, but our first focus is clients. So if we can take some of the burden off of our IT folks, it's not a bad thing. And it's not about just saving money. I think it's agility.
Yeah, and I would add to that is that we have a cloud first strategy too. We are aggressively working towards moving either to SaaS or using public cloud providers to host our applications. For us, it's absolutely about speed to market, productivity, and talent retention. Talent, I would say talent is almost the new oil in the economy today, and people want to work on new technologies. People want to work on cloud, and you need those people to be able to deliver the best solutions for your customers. So for us, it's a three-pronged play to make sure that we are getting the value out of cloud.
I think the other way to look at it, and I think everybody's very much on the same page, is I think what cloud gives you is choices. And when you have choices, you will, and when you think about the world over the last year, you couldn't probably have predicted this, except if you've had choices in how you deliver things, then you can adopt and you can adapt and you can continue to deliver. And so our approach is, everything that can be there, we should go there. What we can, we do as quickly as possible, but we continue to try and drive choices. Can we give engineers different ways to build? Our hackathon was completely virtual, completely cloud, and one of the ways we did that is we required every team to be global, because you couldn't have a team that was even all in the same region, because we wanted them to get used to the fact that you had to have different ways to approach the problem. And so the cloud, is it going to look exactly the same even 6 months from now? Nope. It's in our portfolio. We have goals in there. We're looking at driving apps in there. But the more choices we give great engineers, to your point, Anit, I think they'll build great capabilities and they'll pick the best ones. And in a cloud world, the solutions that aren't very good, they kind of just go away because they don't need to stick around. And so you get a little bit more innovation, you get a little bit more risk taking. So we see it as driving up our ability to make great decisions and to give that great experience both to our developers and to our customers.
And Rick, how do you address the regulatory and security concerns around that? Because everything you say is absolutely right. within the context of obviously a highly regulated and secure environment that you have to operate in?
We have great regulators. I mean, they come in, we spend great deep dives. We've gone through there, in the sense of they are helping us by asking us the right questions. We like these conversations. They're not, some people say regulators put hurdles in front. We don't see it that way. We see it as, what are the questions that we need to be able to answer for you that actually demonstrates that we're doing the right thing? And in many of these cases, you'll see that we probably haven't thought deep enough of it, but we are educating both of us. This is a constantly changing environment. So a lot of it is, our regulators come in and say, give us a deep dive on cloud. And we've done that with them. And we've said, here's our opinions. And what do you think about that? So we've had really great conversations with them, and they recognize that the world is changing. As long as you continue to be upfront and have a regulator that's willing to engage like ours are, I think we continue to move ourselves forward. I found it to be fabulous. They've asked us great questions that make sense that we should answer, and those are the right things to do. So I like it. If you can't bear the scrutiny, sunlight. There's no Louis Brandeis said sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that's something we live by.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time here. I have one question I'd like to on with as many of you as possible. Just sort of a quick answer. Not that it's a simple topic, but we're at the point now where we're all looking at budgets for next year, identifying our priorities, hoping, of course, that there's more to work with next year than there was this year. Can you each maybe just give us a line or so about what your top priority or your top wish list item is for 2021? Maybe we'll start with Rick since he's on my screen.
At principle, the top priorities would be customer experience, and data analytics would be the top two priorities for sure.
Samit, you want to go next?
Yeah, for us, as I said, it's sustained investment over 10 years that will continue across all the priorities that we have, very much driven by customers and also driven by operational excellence, which is just improving the way we do things. We run the shop. And with that, we have 8 lines of businesses, consumer and global banking and markets. So it's going to be a portfolio that gets spread out usually, and that decision is happening as we speak. So I don't think there'll be any big changes other than any small pandemic learnings that we take forward.
Navneet?
I would say 3 things for us. Great customer experience, driving innovation. Given our client base, they demand innovation from us every day. So innovation and digitization is not something we look at as an optional activity from an investment perspective. And the last is operational excellence by automating as much as we can from all the way from start to finish, including the regulatory and security requirements.
I did the same thing. I think it's customer experience first. I think that's highest priority to continue to meet the customers where they want us to meet them. That's number one. And number two, what Emmett said, continue to clean up the back end of the processes. Some of the processes are good old clunky processes. Continue to automate as much as we can. There are better technologies used of continuous use of robotics and artificial intelligence, and continue to innovate there. So it has been some time since we have touched a lot of these things.
That's it.
I guess on my side, so not repeating everything. The only different thing for BNP Paribas, I guess, is around sustainability, having more new business model around sustainability and financial services, and being able to have in a day-to-day banking product, in fact, more effort around climate change and how to drive climate change, in fact, to our clients, both consumer and corporation.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
The last one I would throw out there is, there are so many, and it's great as a technologist, it's a great environment to be in. There's so many great things going in there. But for us, we just continue to focus on outcomes. We focus on that experience. We focus on delivery. We focus on resiliency. And those are the results that we look for, where the questions like cloud and AI and data, all those are the answers to the question as to why would we, what are we doing for what outcome? So our continued focus at UBS is on those outcomes, because we have a great opportunity here to continue to move those forward.
That's great. I would like to thank you all for a fabulous discussion. I know I learned a lot. We will be sending you an events highlight article once it's complete. Special thanks to Sarah and to IBM as sponsor of this event. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week and stay safe.
Thank you all very much for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.